Hello, it is May. It is therefore time to wrap up the things that I read in the month of April. And I didn't read as much as I usually do in the month of April because it was a super busy month. It was Lee's birthday. I went to Luxembourg to visit my friend Joanna with Abby from the channel Abby Salter, so I really didn't read as much as I usually do, but I did read a few things and I enjoyed a few of them, and I'm gonna tell you what I read. So stats first, I read 9 books, 3,672 pages. Only 3 of them were BIPOC. I only hauled 4. Those were my book box books. No DNFs and no books from my top 22 to read in 2022 list. So without any further ado, let's get into the books that I did read. The first one was 4 Aunties and a Wedding, which is the second book in the Aunties series by Jessie Q Santanto. The first book was Dial A for Aunties, which I loved. It was hilarious. This book was also hilarious. I didn't love it as much as book 1, but I did still really enjoy it. All of the aunties are hysterical. The situations our characters find ourselves in, just hysterical. It's a really good, fun, quick, easy read. Highly recommend this series. Definitely feel like this sort of comedy, cozy mystery thing is a genre that I really enjoy, that I just never even thought of before I read Dial A for Aunties, and since then I've read this sequel as well as the Finlay Donovan book. I still have the second one in that series to read, so if you have any recommendations within this genre or recommendations of where I can find people who read within this genre, then let me know. Next, I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This is quite a short one as well, and it is YA fantasy. The other Axie O book that I read was YA romance. That one was called XOXO, and I have to admit I liked that one better than I liked this one, but I did still really enjoy this one. I really liked the atmosphere of the story. So it follows a character who basically takes her sister-in-law's place. So her sister-in-law is supposed to descend into the ocean, but she doesn't want to go, and her husband, our protagonist's brother, is really sad that she has to go. So our protagonist, whose name escapes me, Mina, decides to go in her place. And how much more do I want to say? So she goes down there, and then various scenarios happen that she has to sort out. Because it's so short, I don't want to say too much about what happens in the plot, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the atmosphere and the setting. In particular, I did like the characters, but I'm not usually a setting-driven reader, but this one really got me, so that was what I enjoyed the most about this particular story. Then I read something very different in tone. That was The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is the first book in the I think it's just called The Diviners series. I don't know, there's 4 of them. And this is 1920s dark fantasy mystery type story. I'm pretty sure most people know what this is about anyway, because it's been out for a little while. When did this one come out? I do not know. 2012. Yeah, it's been out for 10 years? No way. That's wild. I had no idea. Anyway, that's what it's about. I enjoyed it. It's not my favourite in this sort of sub-genre necessarily. I liked Stalking Jack the Ripper much more, for example, but this is more on the sort of horror-ish fantasy side than that was, and I'm definitely interested to continue with the series and find out where all of this stuff is going. Then I read the second book in the Alcatraz series by Brandon Sanderson. This one was Alcatraz versus the Scriveners Bones, and I enjoyed this one as well. Again, not as much as the first book, but I still really enjoyed the characters and the narration and the sort of comic element that particularly comes out of the narrative style. I wasn't as keen on the sort of central adventure aspect of this particular instalment in the series, but I'm still definitely going to be continuing with the rest of the series, and I still had a really good time reading it. They're very quick and easy reads naturally because they're middle grade, but I enjoyed myself. Then I read the Stone Girls story by Sarah Beth Durst. Once again, a middle grade book. This one I enjoyed too. Again, not as much as some of her other middle grade stories. I think that The Girl Who Could Not Dream is still my favourite, and then I think after that I like Catalyst best, but I did really enjoy this one, and it reminded me a little bit of the Realm of the Elderlings series, but I don't really want to say why, but it did remind me of that a little bit. We follow a character who is a statue, basically. She's an animated statue, and some of her friends, her statue friends, are not moving anymore, so she needs to find a, what do you call it, stonemason to help recarve their marks so that they can continue moving. And so she goes off on an adventure to find a stonemason, and all sorts of things happen and scenarios that she has to deal with. It's good fun, and it's a standalone, which is always nice. Then I read Under One Roof, which is the first in Ali Hazelwood's STEMinist novellas. This one follows, I'm not going to say too much because it's a novella, but it follows two characters, and essentially them being forced to share a house with each other, even though they don't really want to. And yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams, which I also really enjoyed. This one is very much adult epic fantasy. It is a little bit difficult to explain. So we follow, it's multi-cast, so it's got multiple perspectives that we follow, and it's set in a world where there are vampires, and these, or vampire-like creatures, they're not really vampires, but for all intents and purposes they're vampires, and they used to feed off of the sap of this tree called Ixaril, and unfortunately the tree has died and so isn't producing sap anymore, and so these vampire-like creatures were starting to age, and so to stop the aging process they discovered that they could instead drink human blood, but by doing so they were developing this sickness called the Crimson Flux. And also they live in a world that is, I don't want to say decaying, but kind of decaying, because there were these wars previously, and the remnants of these wars are kind of scattered around the land and are degrading things. And I'm not going to say any more than that. It's a really interesting world, really interesting concept, a little bit confusing at the start, as with most fantasy stories, nothing unusual in that. And I really enjoyed myself. I want to continue with the series, and I don't want to leave it too long before I do that, because I feel like it's the kind of series that you're probably better consuming the books near to each other so that you don't forget too many things. But I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed how different it was, and the audiobook was particularly good for this one, by the way. Next up, I wanted something a little bit more on the romance side of things, so I went with Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Maniscalco. This one I decided to pick up because it was a continuation of a series, and it's still fantasy but with that heavy romance element, and to be honest, the romance is the central plot line, the fantasy stuff is just sort of trimming, to be honest. But I enjoyed this. I like the romantic plots that are going on in here. It's nothing spectacular, but it filled what I needed from it when I decided to pick it up, and I think that the last book is out September-ish time, so I look forward to picking that one up as well once it is out there in the world. And then finally I'm realising that I left this book in the other room, so sorry about that. And that is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, another beginning to an adult epic fantasy series, because I really need to keep reading first books in series, don't I? Anyway, really glad I picked this one up. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. The second book is already out, the third book is also out later on in the year, so I will again probably want to read these fairly close to each other so that I don't forget too much. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. I really like the characters. Once again, the audiobook is fab. I was even more confused at the start of this one than I was at the start of the 9th Reign, so it was a little bit more of a challenge to get my head around the world and the characters and the setting and all that kind of thing, but once I was there it was okay. We follow various characters within this world. There's a very, very cute animal companion, so it's not going to be in my official recommendations for Shardathon Bridge 4, announcement linked up above, but if you're looking for a book to read for the Sil prompt, this would be a great one because the companion is just so precious and adorable. And I mean that's the standout feature of the book for me, to be honest, but the magic is also really cool. It's bone shard magic, so it reminds me a little bit of the magic system in The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst, mixed with the magic system from the Founders trilogy, first book Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. So it's a little bit like coding, it's a little bit like you know, putting specific pieces into creatures to make them do what you want them to do, and I really liked the magic system as well. Again, very interested to see where things are going to go. And that was the last book that I finished in the month of April. I am also going to wrap up the first book that I finished in the month of May, because I started it in April, I finished it yesterday, which was the 1st of May, and to be honest, I'm going to be far more capable of wrapping it up now than I am going to be at the beginning of June, so I'm just going to wrap it up now. So I didn't read this one in April, I read it in May, but still. And that was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This came in the April Illumicrate box, which I unboxed like 2-3 days ago, I don't know, and I really enjoyed this. So it follows, is it 4 characters or 5? There's Irene, Will, Daniel, Lucy and Alex, 5. So it follows 5 members of a crew who are going to be committing heists, basically. They are all Chinese or Chinese American, and I say all because some of them are Chinese and some of them are Chinese American. And they are essentially hired to steal back pieces of Chinese art that are being displayed in various museums around the world, and they're not, you know, they're not professional criminals, they're just college students, but they decide to do this, and it's kind of fun. I mean, it's light, it's easy, it's a debut novel, it reads like a debut novel, but I still enjoyed it, and again, the audiobook for it was very good. It's new, it's by an Asian author, so if you want to support an Asian author during AAPI Heritage Month, I reckon this one's a really good one to pick up. Something a little bit different, but a super fun, quick, easy read, so I recommend it. And that's it. I'm going to leave this video here. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.